Hello everyone and welcome to Learn English with Fiona. Today we're going to talk about conditionals. My name is Fiona Simpson-Stoeber. I'm your English coach, and if you need any more information, go to my website www.learnenglishwithfiona.com or follow me on Instagram. Look forward to seeing you there. Today we're talking about conditional clauses, otherwise known as if clauses. So when do we use an if clause? Well, a conditional sentence or an if clause is a statement that talks about factors that are known and hypothetical situations and their consequences. In other words, I tell you something and I tell you the consequence of that something. So a complete conditional sentence contains a conditional clause and the consequence. For example, if I go to school, I will learn English. If I go to school, that's my condition. I will learn English. That's the consequence of what happens when I go to school. And a comma is used after the if clause when the if clause precedes the main clause, but I'll come to that later on. There are 4 conditionals in the English language, and each one of them expresses a different degree of probability that something will happen. So you have to get a feeling for knowing which conditional clause fits into that you're trying to say. So if it's going to be highly likely, you use a certain clause. If it's very unlikely, use a different clause. The first conditional is known as the zero conditional. This is the easiest to make because it's just a general truth. The second one is the conditional 1, otherwise known as the first conditional, and the outcome of this conditional is very likely, but it's not definite. Conditional 2, on the other hand, the outcome is not likely. In fact, it's very unrealistic that this is going to happen because it's actually already taken place, what's happened. And conditional 3 expresses the outcome that could have been different had something else happened. So, there you know the different conditionals and how we use them. There are 4 in total, and you need to know how to use each one of them. So the first conditional I'm going to talk about is the conditional 0. Now the 0 conditional is a sentence that will express a general truth or a situation in which one thing always causes the other thing. The result is guaranteed. You always know that the result will happen. If you steal, you go to prison. When the teachers come in, you sit down. It's a truth, it's sometimes a rule, but we definitely know that one thing always causes the other thing to happen. Important to know with the 0 conditional is that you can use if and when interchangeably because the outcome always stays the same, so it doesn't matter which word you use. This is often a point of discrepancy for students because they never know when can I use if and when can I use when. The other rule to use if and when, if is when it's a conditional and when is often associated with time. But in this case, conditional 0, they're interchangeable, you can use them both. So how do I put together a 0 conditional sentence? Well, we use the simple present in the if clause and we use the simple present in the main clause, so it's really easy. One common mistake that people do is they use the simple future present. Now that's conditional 1. So if you're using the 0 conditional, you have to take great care always to use the simple present. If you eat too many sweets, your teeth fall out. If I stop work, there is no money. Okay, I could easily put a will in both of these, but it would change the meaning of my sentence, which is why you have to be careful. So if the outcome is guaranteed, then we use conditional 0. Conditional 1, or the first conditional as it's also known, expresses a situation that is likely to happen in the future, but it's not guaranteed, which is the difference to the 0 condition. So, for example, if you don't learn, school will be hard for you. If I go to town, I will buy something at the shops. We form the first conditional by using the simple present tense in the if clause, and we use the future simple present, which is will plus simple present, in the main clause. For example, if you don't learn, school will be hard for you. If I go to town, I will buy something at the shops. The second conditional, or conditional 2, expresses a situation that is very unlikely to happen. These are really unrealistic situations, and so they're more hypothetical. So if you didn't learn vocabulary, you would never learn English. If I won the lottery, I would buy you a car. It's not very likely that I'm going to win the lottery, so it's less unrealistic that I'm going to buy you a car. So I say, if I won the lottery, I would buy you a car. So how do I put a conditional 2 or a second conditional sentence together? Well, in the if clause, we use the simple past, and in the main clause, we use a modal auxiliary word like would, could, should, might, and the infinitive form of the verb. So if you didn't learn vocabulary, didn't learn is the simple past of to learn, you would never learn English. Would is the modal auxiliary verb, and learn is the infinitive from to learn. If I won the lottery, won being the simple past, I would buy you a car, would plus infinitive. And the final conditional is conditional 3, or the third conditional. Now, conditional 3 sentences express a situation in the present that would be different if the circumstances had been different in the past. So, for example, if I had visited my friend, I would have known we had English homework. If we had switched on the news, we would have heard about the plane crash. So, if I had known something beforehand, so if the circumstances beforehand had been different, then my present now would also be different. That's what we use the conditional 3 for. The conditional 3 is put together that the if clause uses the past perfect, which is had plus the past participle, and the main clause uses a modal auxiliary, as with conditional 2, only this time we don't use the infinitive, we use the present perfect tense. So would, could, should, might, plus have, plus past participle. For example, if I had visited my friend, I would have known we had English homework. Had visited is past perfect, would is the auxiliary verb, and have known is the present perfect. If we had switched on the news, we would have heard about the plane crash. Now, it wouldn't be the English language if we didn't have exceptions, because as with everything in the English language, there's always an exception, and the conditional is no exception to this. The simple future is only used in the main clause except when the action in the if clause takes place after that in the main clause. For example, if learning vocabulary will help me, I will learn later. Now, normally I tell my students as a rule, you never have a will in an if clause. That works for 95% of sentences. So when you're learning, it's a good rule to follow until you get the hang of it. But there are exceptions, and the exception to this rule is when what happens in the if clause takes place after what happens in the main clause. So in this case, if learning vocabulary will help me, I will learn later. So if it's going to help me, then I will learn it, but I'll do it later. How do we punctuate conditional sentences? Well, it's very easy. An if clause is punctuated if the if clause precedes the main clause. So if the if clause is the first part of your sentence, then you put a comma after it and the main clause follows. Example, if I miss the bus, comma, I will be late. If the main clause precedes the if clause, we don't use a comma. For example, I will be late if I miss the bus. No comma. Okay? So that's my lesson today on conditionals. I hope it helped you. If you need any more information, please do not hesitate to go to my website. You will find worksheets on the blog that you can download and try. And never forget, repetition is the mother of skill. If you want to be good in English, you have to practice, practice, practice. There you go. Which conditional was that? Remember, using the language will lead you to your success. Thank you very much for trusting me to help you learn English. For more information, please go to www.learnenglishwithfiona.com or follow me on Instagram, Learn English with Fiona.